Now let's talk about pack primitive and let's further explore copying the geometry inside of Houdini. And right now, here as you can see, we are facing the problem where we have this geometry that is made out of multiple connected pieces of geometry. And I want to copy this geometry in here as a whole and not as its connected individual pieces. So the way we can solve this, we can either create a manual attribute in here. So I'm going to create a maybe attribute create node in here, and I'm going to manually create our class attribute. So let me see onto the connectivity what we are creating. We are creating a looking for the point, and it should have a point attribute class integer. So what I can do, I can go into this class one in here, and by the way, it does not matter if you create a point or primitive attribute. Okay, so right now we are using the class integer as a point attribute. I can change this to primitive, and if I middle mouse button, and here as you can see, now we are creating the class as a integer attribute, and the other one, the class, this point attribute is actually coming from this one in here. So if I were to shake this node off, and if I middle mouse button, and here as you can see, we no longer have the class on the point level, but we only have the class onto the primitive level, and it is a integer. So when we are going to use this attribute from pieces node, it will look for the either point or primitive, and it will store the attribute for us. And here as you can see, we have the class as an integer, and the copy to point node will work. And here as you can see, it's working just fine. It's understand the both point as well as the primitive attribute, this attribute from pieces node, and also it understand the both integer as well as the string. So if you create a string, it's also fine. If I middle mouse button, here as you can see, now we are creating a class, and now it's a string, and it is working fine. So it's up to you if you want to use the string or integer. I'm just keeping this as default, all of these settings to default. So these are the default settings that came with the connectivity. The default setting is that we have a primitive attribute class, and it's an integer. I'm going to create my own attribute onto this one, and I'm going to create a primitive, and for this one it's a type. Let's change this to integer, and I'm going to assign my own value 45 maybe. And here as you can see, we are creating this one, this attribute, but now connectivity will override this because it look for the connectivity and assign its own value. So that is why this method is actually not working. So what we can do, we can actually pack our geometry. So the one way we can solve this is to pack our geometry. If I were to tap a pack node in here, let's add this and let's connect this in here and view the result. So now what the pack node will does, it will pack our geometry into one points. If I middle mouse button, here as you can see, now I only have one point and one primitive, and it is a packed primitive geometry. And down here we can see we have the packed geometries. Right now we only have one packed geometry. So now it's a one single point, which means now I cannot access its individual primitive. If I were to enable my selection tool, and here as you can see, I can select this as a whole. And right now I currently have turned off this selection constraint, and here as you can see, these constraints are off, and I do not have access to the individual primitives. And if I want to access the individual primitives, I need to unpack this. So let's add an unpack node, and we also have a node unpack for unpacking the packed geometry. And now here as you can see, I have access back to all of my points and primitives. Now I can enable my selection tool, and now I can select all of these primitives, and if I want to select the points, I can. that's what we are doing. We are packing our geometry into one single point. So it's a point, single point, and Houdini knows how to draw this as our original geometry. And it is a much efficient way of working when you are working with copying your geometry. And here as can see, we can see that into my RAM, I'm only storing 3.16 kilobytes. And if I were to take a look my original geometry and middle mouse button, and here as can see, I am now storing 2 megabytes. So it will add up. So when I were to, let's say, just copy this in here onto the copy to points, and I'm only just connecting this into the connectivity. Maybe let's not put this into the connectivity, but connect this directly. I'm just, let me see why it's not refreshing. That is the geometry. I think we need to put this into in here. So now we have all of these rubber toy geometries copied. And if I were to middle mouse button, and here as you can see, now we are copying 48 megabytes into my RAM. And it will add up. If I were to increase the number of points, as number of copies will get increased, my Houdini session will get slow and slow. And if I middle mouse button, and here as you can see, now we are on to 170 megabytes. It will adding up. So if I were to pack this geometry, if I connect this, so now we are packing this into one single piece of point. Okay, we have 1 point, and now we have 3 kilobytes of memory. And now if I were to view this onto the copy to points and view this, and here as you can see, now we are down to only 381 kilobytes, and it is much more efficient to work with. So it is always recommended to pack your geometry whenever you are working with these, whenever you are instancing your geometry. And you can always have access to your original geometry by after that you can add the unpack node. If any reason you need to access your primitives, you can unpack after them. And here as you can see, we will have our original geometry back. So that's what the pack primitives are, and you can learn more about them if I add the pack node in here, and let's click on this mark in this button that will open up the help page of this node. And here we have the pack geometry, and you can scroll down in here and it is explain all of these things in much more detail. And I actually encourage you to take a look at this help documentation to learn more about them, and it's very well explained in here. So that's what the packed primitives are, and that's what we are going to do. We are going to pack our geometry first into single point. So now I'm going to just connect this in here. So let me rearrange this node graph, and let's connect this in here. And now because we only have 1 point, now the connectivity sub should not create any problems because now we only have one piece of geometry. So onto the connectivity, we should get everything correct. Let me remove this. And now I'm going to connect this. That is our geometry library. And we have all of these settings correct. We just need to plug this in here and view this. And now here as you can see, I have all of these geometries copied correctly. Now I can play around with these settings, and now I can just keep adding more geometries. Let's say I want to add a squab in here. So let's add a squab, and it too should have multiple pieces of connected geometry. So I just need to add a pack node in here. And let's connect this and connect this into the merge, and it should be in our system. And here as you can see, we have our squab, and maybe let's go into the add this shader as well. And we also have our pig head geometry. So let me add this, and it too have a multiple pieces of geometry. So let's add an back node in here and connect the back node, and let me move this aside and make this network in here. Let me rearrange these nodes because it's getting messy. Move them up, move them into the side, move this onto this side, and connect this into the merge. And now we should have our big head in our stream as well. So that's how you can copy multiple geometries. I can increase the number of points in here. And right now onto the attribute from pieces, here as you can see we have different types of modes. The mode is right now set to patch, which means it will creating the patch pattern. I can define the patch size in here, and here as you can see we have this patch, the way it will distributing these attribute, or I can change this to cycle and it will cycle all of the geometry, which means if I were to reduce the number of points, we should cycle through. So this mode is pretty simple. We have this one option patch to create the patch, and we also have the option to noise, and onto the noise we can define the element size to create different noise pattern, and it will be more visible if we have more points. And here we can define the element size, so that's the noise space distribution. And we also have some other option. We have the random, that is the random distribution. That's the attribute from pieces node.